But I wanted to get more into this thing. Okay, what's an actual club about? What is the Melbourne Football Club? What is its purpose in regard to it all? And spent a bit of time over the summer just giving this a little bit of thought, and come up, without coming up with a statement, try to come up with some words. And our footy club's been around since 1858. We're the only club in the competition, the only club in the world that I can see who can actually trace their heritage to the actual heritage of the game itself. We wrote the rules of the game. Are we the only major football or major team in the world playing the game that it actually invented? It would be interesting. I've never found anyone to actually contradict that particular thing. So, big part of what Melbourne's tried to do and what our club's tried to do this past 12 to 18 months is put ourselves back at the heart of the game again. And being back at the heart of the game is understanding those things. And so I think the first word which we're going to start looking at is it's an interesting word in itself. It's this notion of timelessness. Melbourne needs to be a timeless club. Whilst we need to evolve and stay modern, and an interesting thing is that, you know, even with the new jumper with a very modern flavour and these sorts of things, it obviously harks back in look and feel very much to what the very traditional jumper is. And the fact that we have these two things working together. To say that, okay, there's some fundamentals which haven't changed, but there is a certain, which creates the timelessness, but yes, it needs to be modern, it needs to be real. And it's interesting, we're doing some work at the moment where we're going to go back and we're going to present all players who have played a game for Melbourne, and there's around 1,200 of them, and try and trace as many as we possibly can. We're going to try and present them or their families a jumper which is similar to this, which is sort of representative of the club's golden era, which was modelled on you might recall a Whiteboard Wednesday where we talked about Stuart Spencer's 1955-56 premiership jumper. It's been modelled on that particular Guernsey. Got the rough woolly and it's nice and heavy and love all that sort of stuff, as you know. So that's where this notion of timelessness comes in. So that's the first point in regard to it all. The next one is simply this word identity. People align their personal identity with the identity of the club. The reason the club actually exists is this particular thing. For without it, the energy goes out of the place. If people stop loving us, well, we won't have a club anymore. And what's gone before us, and it'll just be history. It'll be Roman Empire. It'll be all sorts of things. Everyone will say it was great once, but it's not great anymore. So we have to continue to work with what we consider understanding why people love us and relate our club to those things all the time. So one of the things, even over this last period of time, is how we make Melbourne feel more like Melbourne. And that identity is important. And people say they've had 4th and 5th generation Melbourne supporters, and that's a very, very powerful message in itself. So identity is critical to what we're trying to actually build. The next one we're talking about is moments. I was with Todd Viney recently, and we're just having a cup of coffee, and someone came up and said their first game of football they saw was a final. It was against the Kangaroos in 1987, and they remember Todd kicking a goal to start that game, and it was a left foot from the boundary. It was a freak of nature. Todd could try that kick a million other times in his career, never once get it through, but he got it through on this particular day, and it was a day that they remember a great moment that they had. The same way as people might look at a Liam Jarrah or an Aaron Davey or a James Frawley, and they become moments of and we want to create these great moments. And I often say that the footy club's given me moments of which I define other things by in the context of my own life, because I've been very fortunate to be around the club through an important stage of my own existence. So moments become just fundamentally in regard to it all. And we want to create these beautiful moments. And the ultimate moment, quite clearly, is watching your team win the premiership in that sense. The next one is what we call heroes. And icons, not just heroes in a football sense, but icons of the game as well. And the heroes, obviously, people will talk about, the Barassis or the Flowers or the great people. But even in the context of our great premiership era, there are other icons of the game, whether it's Norm Smith or Jimmy Cardwell or Bert Chadwick, or even the era before, Percy Page, Checker Hughes, these sorts of guys. They were icons of the game. Jimmy Steins has been a hero, but he's also an icon. And I think people understand the difference not the difference, but the relationship between those two things. And we want to produce them as the club, because they then create all these other things as we're starting to evolve and we're starting to work through in regard to that as well. The next one, which I think, and it probably always, it's a hard word to describe, but it's this simple notion of folklore. it's the storytelling. It's the we had when we went to China last year. Robbie Flower came along on the trip. Well, Robbie Flower, none of the players who were there would have ever seen Robbie Flower play in the flesh, but they understood him to be a hero and icon, but also understood his folklore within our club as well. That these people who become part of just the fabric of what it actually is and the stories that surround them and in and around them. Liam Jarrah is quickly becoming folklore, because of his remarkable story. And that's a consideration in regard to it all, because it's what gives it colour and it's what gives it flavour and it's what passes from father to son to grandson. They'll tell stories of their favourite ever player. And I find myself now realising that I'm talking about players who, their careers had well finished before some of our players were even born, but they understand the folklore of these particular individuals and how important they are in regard to it all. And the final one, for want of a better expression, is just this notion of silverware. And that's quite clearly the premiership and winning the premiership. And we're all here to, and that's an absolute focus. But in regard to it, and I think it's really easy to get myopic on this particular thing, that you think it's all about that. But we're more important than just that. And it's not just because we haven't won one for a long time. But clubs, and even you have a look at what Collingwood's gone through, it took Collingwood and Eddie and Mick and these guys who have done all this work over a long period of time, it took them 12 years to get their first premiership cup. But they'd created a lot of this stuff in the meantime. And the strength of Collingwood is really a lot because of these other things that they've done. And I think we, because of our relationship with the heritage of the game, can in fact be better at this than anyone else, because the storytelling that we've got is real and it's authentic. And had the time last year with Moyston, with David Neitz, and we went up to the place where Tom Wills, apparently was influenced by the Indigenous kids that he saw play, and that influenced then, him writing of the rules and the game that we now play. That we had with David Neitz, someone who's played more games, kicked more goals, captained more games, with his direct lineage in this particular place to the very origins of our sport in the 1840s. It's quite a remarkable thing that we actually have, and we will continue to inherit. So we think this is, if we're talking about what our purpose is, we say, okay, we think there's a statement somewhere in and around these words which will describe it. The next challenge is, in how we articulate that through what does it actually look like, what does winning look like in regard to each of these areas, and then ultimately what do we have to excel at to become great at it. And we do articulate it quite openly in documents such as this. This is the football one, but we will do this in regard to the whole of the club over the next little while. Highly recommend the book. For those who love, who are into this type of thing in terms of building organisations and the sorts of things which they want to be, they want it to be real, not to be just something that they've made up or the last thing that they've actually read. This can give you that'll give you the background to this type of thing, and I'm sure you'll get a lot from it. So welcome back to Whiteboard Wednesday in 2011, and I look forward to catching you next week. Thanks very much.